Um, Last week, I had an example where if you looked at a sea, that we were asked two questions. One question was, is the face that I see now the same as the face I saw before? And that lit up the using fMRI. You put a person in a magnet and looked at his brain activity, you would see activity on the underside of the brain. And then if you ask the same, say now look at the same scene, but tell me when the face that you're looking at now is in the same location as the one that you saw before. You had the very top of the brain light up along the parietal lobe. Now, the reason I mentioned that is that what I forgot to mention was not that have to know for the exam, but as you know, this building is the BMI building, or where the BMI home is. And I think I mentioned that one of our stars is this guy called Adrian Owen, who recently wrote this book called the Gray Zone. And his in that book he talks about the patients he studied, and these patients are people that are in a vegetative state. That is, they're in a coma, and they've been in this coma for years. They're lying in the hospital or some other care facility, and people visit them every day, but nobody knows whether they're aware of anything around them. And Adrian used a task similar to the one that we covered in class. In one case, he asked put these subjects that are in a coma in an fMRI machine so he could see the brain activity, and then asked them, okay, think about playing tennis. So that's like an action thing that you talk, it's a complicated action, and it lights up the top of the head, but in particular, a region that lights up if you either think about doing something complicated with your motor hands, arms, legs, or imagine it. Okay, in either case, it lights up. And so this place in the top of the head would light up for all his control subjects, students like you that he tested. And also, then he had another question. Think about the places in your house, exploring places in your house. And there's an area just beside the fusiform face area, underneath the brain, that instead of faces, it recognizes places like the Eiffel Tower, things in your room, your house. And so he had these two tasks, and he would ask them. And he found out that about 15% of the patients that were in a vegetative state would respond differently to these two questions. In one case, the top of the brain lit up. In the other case, the bottom of the brain lit up. And using this as a yes or a no, you can have a conversation with such a person. You can say, if you're in pain, think about this. And if you saw activity in the top, let's say, think about playing tennis. Uh, and if it's a yes, you think about tennis. And so you can ask the patient, are you in pain? Are you aware of everyone around you visiting you? And he found that 15% of the subjects were completely aware of the world around them, but of course they couldn't respond in any way. Anyways, I thought it's a sort of a neat thing that you can do with the example that I showed you last week. For today, the first thing is owl. Okay. You guys did very well. I think somewhere in the 90s was the class average. The one thing you had difficulty on is this last question, question 4. Okay, this one almost everyone got correct. I think this is the online class, so that's why there's not 80 or 90 students answering this question. Um, so, what was that question? Well, let's look it up here. So that question 4, was which cortical region is most likely be activated by the appropriate stimulus in the ipsilateral visual field? Okay. Now, not the ipsilateral part of the eye or something like that. It's the ipsilateral visual field. And some of you picked the lateral geniculate nucleus as that structure. And you can see here in this picture, so the signal's coming from the left, and it lights up the right LGN and the right visual cortex. The signal's coming from the right, it lights up the left LGN and the left visual cortex. Okay. Any other questions? Any other problems with the quizzes that you'd like me to go over? Okay, if not, then we'll go on to look at this week's. Oops, I don't want to do that.